Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sparks Entertainment and Art. And today is Record Store Day. And so we are going to celebrate Record Store Day. There's been a lot out there on Number One in Heaven. We're going to look at the other album that is being released, and that is Noel's album, Is There More to Life Than Dancing? And my guest today is someone who loves that album. And like me, he's not a guy who you'd think of as a disco guy, but we both love the album, but he really knows it backward and forward. So I am so happy to introduce Drew, and we're going to talk about the album and a few other things. So Drew, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Monty. I appreciate it.
Well,
It's an interesting
absolutely.
claim to fame to be the first time going online for anything to be the expert on obscure late 70s disco albums. But not something I had on my bingo card, but here we are.
Well, maybe that'll be my next podcast is obscure 70s disco albums. What do you think?
I'm not sure either of us has the requisite expertise for that, but
I have
hey,
none. I have none.
I got
But
this. I got this.
this is as good as it gets.
On
Oh,
that number one heaven, right? There you go.
I forgot to grab them. I have the original of this album when it came out, as well as the original of the Dancing is Dangerous single, which I got in Boston.
Wow, that's
So,
awesome. I
uh,
think that's really cool stuff. It kind of amazes me that anybody was aware of this at the time, given the kind of mystery that's hung around it ever since I assumed for 45 years now, but that's
well,
cool stuff.
well, let's go to you and your story. How did you find this album? What led you to Sparks in the first place? And let's get caught up. Let's go to you.
Oh, the way I came to Sparks actually was the Go-Go's. I see this Cool Places video and I'm like, wow, this is bad. This is really dreadful stuff. And just didn't think much of it at all. Just kind of moved on. But I'm reading these interviews with Jane in particular, Jane Weedlin, and she keeps mentioning Sparks, how she was obsessed with Sparks. This, that. So like, I like, all right, let me try to seek this out some other way. So I do their like Wikipedia page or something, and somewhere on there at that time somebody had mentioned the Little Beethoven album and how they thought it was the greatest album ever made, or Sparks said it was the greatest album ever made, or something like this. So I end up like one night with a crappy iPhone speaker laying on the couch at 1 2 a.m. listening to this Little Beethoven album. I have no idea who these people are, what they look like, nothing, but it just hooked me. There was something there. Like, it wasn't like I immediately was like, "Ah, this is the greatest thing I ever heard," but I kind of was really intrigued by it. And the next day, I played it for my wife. She's kind of intrigued by it too. And that night, we end up kind of jumping around on YouTube and just listening to all these different Spark songs. And I mentioned a few times on Twitter and elsewhere that I think they're the perfect YouTube band because they have this massive back catalog. And when we were watching on YouTube, we're just getting suggested new videos after watching one. And each one we clicked on, we just had no idea what we were going to get. We could get, My Baby's Taking Me Home. And then the next thing I click on is La Dolce Vita. And I know people like to say, "Oh, you can always tell it's a Sparks song." Well, can you? Because I can tell you that first night, it was shocking to me that those were the same bands, and I would have never put that together. Um, so that was it. I was hooked on Sparks. I listened to Number One in Heaven the first time ever in a grocery store during the pandemic, and felt like I was taken to the moon or on another planet or something with that. And again, that was after listening to a bunch of Sparks singles and listening to Angst in My Pants and some other albums, but I hadn't listened to that one. And so that was my first experience listening to it. I'll never forget that shopping trip. Just totally sucked me in with all the sound of the synths is really the thing. They change pretty quickly in history after that. You get these 80s synth sounds just sounded different than that. Those early ones had this I don't know, like industrial quality to them that I don't think you get later on. And so I was hooked. I had read at that point about this Noel album they made. Didn't, I'm still just trying to listen to, pulling rabbits out of a hat or something. Like, I hadn't gotten there yet. So I'm working my way through all the other Spark stuff. And eventually one day I listened to the thing this is after listening to Terminal Jive, and I love a lot of parts of Terminal Jive, but it was a letdown compared to Number One in Heaven. And for me, it was mostly just because it didn't sound like it. The synths didn't sound like the synths on Number One in Heaven, even though it was only a year later. It already sounded faltermired. It sounded 80s, right? Like it had gotten that 80s crunchiness to it, cheesiness to it that I don't think was there before. So I didn't know anything about the Noel album except they'd done this thing, and I'd read a lot of different things they'd done. The singing in the shower with La Rita and stuff like that. So I didn't really do anything with it. But a couple months later, I finally listened to it, and it was like, oh, here's those synth sounds from Number One in Heaven. Like, holy crap, like they did this. And then just the enigma around it, reading about it and all that. I just felt like, wow, this is like the one thing that I found right away at that point, having listened to Sparks for a few months then, was that it absolutely sounded like a Sparks album to me.
Yeah. Well, the Number One in Heaven was recorded in 1978, and this was recorded in 1979. And so
Right.
is what my understanding. So this is clearly where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. Whereas Terminal Jive sounds like it's something, as you said, it was very faltermired. It was kind of put into a certain box. But this album that we're talking about, the Noel album, is really a unique piece. And when I hear it, I didn't listen to it much until recently, but as I've been listening to it, I'm starting to really hear more and more layers and more things that they're
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
bring out in there.
Um, this Noel album is really pure Sparks, right? With the exception of you don't get the Russell vocals, but it sounds like we might get that really soon, which will be awesome. But yeah, it's this was what they wanted to do, and like you said, the time frame of it that they'd recorded Number One in Heaven in '78, and then they were able to make this other album immediately afterwards, it sounds like in '79, because this is where, like you said, they fell for these electronic synthesizers in a way that I think really, really shows on this album through and through. They're going all in on this. We're going to make 12-minute dance club pieces where people on God knows what drugs are going to be out there dancing their asses off all night long. And at first, that's kind of all I heard, was that this was like club music. And just like you said, even though I'd listened to this album, I don't even know how many times before the last few weeks, listening to it again in kind of preparation for this, all manner of layers and different sounds, and the construction is so Sparksian that I'm kind of surprised to say, well, people might not be surprised, but I think I like it. I definitely like, there's things I love about it now, even more just from the last 2 weeks of listening to it
For
closely.
example,
For example, um, the on this, what would be side two, right? You get this. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I really feel like there's two main musical pieces on this. There's side one, which is Dancing is Dangerous, into the title track. And then side two, you've got another kind of two-song suite, and then you have I Want a Man added afterwards. But there's the transitions between those two songs on side two, between um it ends with Au revoir. What's the song before that? Geez, I
the night they
drawing a
invented
blank here.
love.
Yeah, The Night They Invented Love, right? The sexy saxophone suite, as I'd like to call it, right? Um, there's a trance piece in there where those songs are kind of being stitched, connected together, that to me foreshadows like mid late '90s rave music, in
Mhm.
something I'm not super into either, but it just seemed like completely ahead of its time and really just pristinely constructed. You can hear these little, and I have some theories on how they went about making this thing too, which I'd love to know if I'm right or not. But there's these little like 4 or 8 bar pieces of music, and a lot like they do later in like My Baby's Taking Me Home and like Little Beethoven era, where they're just adding something each run through, or taking something away, or building up, and now you've got 8 or 9 different layers of sound going, and then the next 4 bars are going to be, just only two of those layers, so you can hear them better. And I just got sucked into this thing every which way, and the one thing I should address right away is that early on, I, reading some conspiracy theories, was looking for evidence that this is actually Russell Mael singing through some kind of vocoder or something like that. I don't believe that to be the case at all. That
So
is a
it's
female
interesting
vocal.
that you raise that because
Yeah.
I also do not believe that. I don't believe that, and I don't even really hear it. Now, maybe he was singing through some, like you said, a vocoder or something, but I don't hear it.
No,
To me, it
no.
sounds like a unique individual
Yeah.
with that doesn't sound like Russell to me. And it's
No.
interesting that that theory really stayed alive for years and years.
I think you're right, and I think that if I had to try to guess where that came from, would be you mentioned in the podcast with Christian, the All I Ever Think About Is Sparks podcast, which I think anybody watching this, go check that out because it's just incredible. Labor of love, so much
Agree.
there.
Agree.
Right. It's awesome. So,
Props to Christian. Props to Christian.
yeah, you can tell that labor of love how much he's must have poured into that, and I appreciate it the heck out of him for that. But you mentioned
I
that
just
you
get
could.
to show up now and then and
Yeah.
talk because I
That's
can't
what
give
I'm
him
doing
enough
here.
credit.
This is
And every now and
great.
then I think, come on, let's do another one. But I say, how can I possibly rush him given that he's doing all the work?
Oh yeah, right. I guess you just show up for the scheduled appointment then, right?
When he calls, I'm there.
Well,
I
you
love
you
doing them.
mentioned on the Noel episode that you felt like Russell was right there off to the side guiding her through this. And I think what has thrown people is the cadence of it. The delivery of it is very Russell. The voice itself isn't Russell at all. It's
I
a,
don't think so.
like you said, it's a I've
Yeah.
come to really like her voice on the album actually, and I love what they do with it. There's stretches where there's 100 of her singing overdubbed the top of each other, and then they'll bring it all the way down to just one vocal track. I've come to really love it. I mean, I love everything about it. I'll admit I'm the most biased person you can talk to about this, but I have to say that might be the origin of the conspiracy theory, the kind of cadence and delivery that she gives throughout the album.
Well, and also when you hear the words, like let's go to the because I'm thinking about the great words in "Is there more to life than dancing?" You know,
Oh yeah,
and
right.
that's so raw and male. And but let's step back from
Yes.
that just for a second because it wasn't until I did the podcast with Christian that I realized the connectivity between "Dancing is Dangerous" and that song. Is there more to life than dancing? And now I'm just blown away by it.
Right. It's this story. And even I was listening to it one more time this morning through, and it dawned on me that Dancing is Dangerous could be this. I think it's their launching off point for the whole story, but it's a story of how they've been seduced by dance music, right? Like it kind of is very meta. Your other guest there who talks about
I
the
was just
meta
gonna say I
spike
got
stuff.
another Paul Barrett on my hands now.
Right. Well, I some of his theories are fascinating. I'll admit I don't think
Oh,
I'm
he's
quite
great.
there with
He's
it
great.
all the
He's
way,
great.
but
Yeah.
this piece I think they're talking about like, well, dancing is dangerous, and we've been sucked into this. So I think in their what they do is they create a character to embody that, and then that character has a complete life of its own from that point forward. And that character in this one is definitely female. It's this, Noel is the one voicing this narrator. And just how it's, dancing is dangerous. It gently embraces us, but then the danger is it won't let go. You're stuck
Right.
with this now. And that's so Sparksy. That's Ron through and through. Like Ron, one of the things I love about Ron's lyrics in general are how they're so human in our like vulnerable ways, right? Like something great happens. I always talk about the song Good Morning. Something great happens. He wakes up next to this knockout beauty that he must have spent the night with, and it's not more than like a half a verse before he's like, well, did I marry her? Did I? I don't remember what happened. Did I get so? Did I catch something from her? Is she
And
infectious? Like,
and, and and you can see her leaving and him saying to himself, "Does Dust Devanya really mean good morning?" What?
just ridiculous. And that's like we've all spiraled like that, right? Like we've all like had something objectively good happen, and within a minute or two, we're thinking of all the ways it could go sideways, right? And that's Ron. And I think this song, the "Dancing is Dangerous" piece, starts with it. It's hey. You know, it gently embraces us. It's a cool thing. We're into this dance music, but now, oh my God, I'm addicted. I'm hooked. It's sinister somehow, you know? And I do think there is kind of this, I don't know if sinister is the right word, but there's some
Well, the
kind
two
of,
words you use that have stuck with me in our various conversations were that sly and diabolical Ron
oh,
Mail, and you meant it
yes,
only with love.
a
But
hundred
I
percent.
I love those two words, and you're talking. We're going all over the place. You're talking about the song Au revoir, and we'll come back to that. But
Yeah,
sticking to these two songs,
yeah.
it's so Ron Mail when she says Sheila. She refers to her friend as Sheila, which is, nobody knows who Sheila is, but that's so Ron Mail,
I thought of that
and
just
it just
yesterday. It's like,
makes
who
it
the hell
real
is
life.
Sheila?
Maybe it's Sheila. I don't know who it is. I don't know anything about disco people, but but it's so Ron.
Yes, it's so
Sheila.
Ron. Yes, and like so observant, you know, like maybe he was at a club once and there was someone named Sheila. Like all these things came to my head even just yesterday. Like, who the hell is Sheila? Who is she talking to here?
There you go.
But but
So
they
an interesting aspect of it to me too, though, which I've been thinking about lately, is that this was when Russell was saying, "We're done with guitars. We're done with guitars."
right,
And they came back on Terminal Jive, so that didn't last very long. And then, of course, their whole, '80s era.
right.
But this doesn't have the guitars.
Nothing. And
So
that
this is kind
actually,
of, they're still
yeah.
in that mindset. We're not using guitars. We're really going to see what we can do here as Ron and Russell Mael, as opposed to Ron and Russell Mael and Giorgio Moroder, so we can build this foundation for where we're going to go.
Number One in Heaven leads them to this Noel album where that first side, there isn't even the addition of the sexy saxophone, which doesn't appear until side two.
Correct.
So Dancing is Dangerous, you've just got pure synths. The drum sounds on this are fascinating to me, and you could speak to this better than I
No,
can.
no, I want to hear
I
what you have to say because I've talked about how much I love Number One in Heaven and the drum sounds there, but this is not Keith Forsey. So you
No.
go. I want to hear what
All
you
right.
think. Why are they
So this
fascinating?
I'll get into a bit of theory, and I definitely want to come back to the diabolical nature of the lyrics, and the story and the setting and all that Ron gives you. But I have a theory. I heard an interview with Keith Forsey where, or I read it. He said they asked him, "Well, what do you remember from playing on that album?" And he said, "Well, I don't really remember playing any of the songs all the way through." Giorgio would say, "Play this 12-bar piece or play 8 bars
Yeah,
of this,"
yeah, I
and
saw that.
right. So to me, like it's like early sampling, right? Like we're going to record this sample bit. We don't have the drum machine here we're using, but we're going to take that and just loop that over and over and over again. And I really suspect that Ron and Russell took that skill with them for this Noel album. And these drum sounds, there's the bit on the Fan Mail Albums Project website where on the Number One in Heaven one, where he said, I actually took a screenshot of this. The guy who did the drums on that is so they talked to a guy named Gary Chang who said he was doing like the synthesizer engineering and stuff. But there was Bob Stone offered his wizardry with the drum sounds. This is before sample drum machines. So he
But
doesn't say playing drums.
this is clearly not a live drummer, right? I mean,
Well, I wonder if there are pieces where they recorded a live drummer playing just a few bars and then fed that through whatever kind of
hmm
synthesizer machines they were using at the time. Because there's times where it sounds almost just like a bongo drum. There's times where I hear hi hat, the classic disco kind of thing you get,
right.
but it doesn't sound like it's a human playing it. I think that's because it might have been a human playing a bit of it, but it's been modulated and basically sampled and strung together to get some of these drum sounds. But then there's pieces where I'm like, okay, that's a drum, and then the drum changes pitches so much that it's like, well, you can't do that with a drum. So what the hell was that?
Yeah, it doesn't come across to me as live drumming, which is a big difference from Number One in Heaven. But this was
Right.
their immersion. This was their immersion in. This is Number One in Heaven is not a disco album, in my opinion. This is a disco album.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think they're both disco albums. I think when I first listened to Number One in Heaven, I called it a psychedelic disco. That's kind of
Hmm.
what it
Hmm.
sounded like to me, disco from another planet. But now I've listened to them both so
That, yeah,
many times that I don't even know what I hear anymore as far as like a
right.
genre. But yeah, these are in that realm. Like we're into the dance music realm, 100%. And like you said, this album is unabashedly disco. If I had heard it somehow without ever knowing Ron and Russell Mael or Sparks or anything, I'd probably okay, it's some 70s disco stuff and probably not giving it that much thought afterwards. So I'm glad I came to it the way I did. And I wish I knew a lot more about how they constructed the thing. You know, I have these theories that they did it in little pieces and strung them together, but of course, I've got very little to go on here as way of actual evidence.
Right. And well, that's another fascinating thing to me. That's all something to me that's always been fascinating about this album. There's no credits.
Nothing. There's like nothing. Like who played the saxophone? And how did that work? Did they have the whole song already, and then he just played over the top of it? Like how what? And who did it? You know, we have no idea. But maybe
Why do
we'll
you
find
think
out.
there are no credits? I don't have an answer.
I I don't either. And all I know is that bit that I just read you, that I read on Root's site, and it's all mysterious. And you wonder, is this deliberate? And it sure sounds like it. And I don't know if it's because they were afraid. I mean, they put their name on it, right? Like
Their
you
name is
see
on it. Written, produced
written,
by
produced,
Ron and composed by Ron
right?
and
Like
Russell Mael. Then there's one
right.
or two
That's
other
it.
things, various things, and that's it. There's no long list of who did what and how it was made or even where it was made. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing.
Nothing. And it's this I get annoyed by the goofy font they chose to use on that album cover, but
It's so
that's
amateur.
it looks like a proto Comic Sans, but
Yeah.
the whole thing is it's really mysterious. And even like when I first listened to the album and loved it, okay, who is Noel? And then with a little digging, you can find the name Patricia A. Noel. Uh,
I've
I
tried to dig
listen,
her up. I've not dig her up.
right.
I've tried to find her with no luck whatsoever.
Yeah, and then like the Noel and the Red Wedge album, I gave that a listen once. There's nothing there. There's no there at all.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. And then after that, it's like, well, is she's selling real estate now? Like what I wonder. And it was really kind of warmed my heart to see this press release from the males about that they've tracked her down and she's written some liner notes. So I'll be
Agree,
happy to.
although I'm question I really wonder what that phrase "tractor down" means. I mean, they make it just adds to the mystery 50 years later or whatever it is, or 40
They
years whatever.
they know
I'm
what they're
sure it was
doing.
just picking up a phone call and a tractor down. And
Oh, they know what
I
they're
love
doing,
that.
Monty, right? Like they know what they're doing. If
They
anybody can
always
build
know what they're doing.
tension, they know what they're doing, and it's pretty awesome to see, especially with them. I think making good use of the limelight they've been afforded here the last couple of years. So they didn't go about this like they thought it was just going to be some obscure thing that was going to lay buried for 40 some years. It, it,
No,
it seemed
no,
it
they
seemed to
didn't.
me they really thought they might have like a popular pure top 40 level disco hit on their hands.
Well,
Um,
they had just had a couple big hits with the last album, and
yeah,
so they're kind of they were back in the spotlight a little bit,
yeah,
and that was the time, and they thought they would be able to really capitalize on that, I guess, and they thought they had
yeah.
something, and we see it as something special, but it didn't really do much.
Yeah, and you wonder how what how exactly why that is, and I mean that's something that's been endlessly debated among Sparks people forevermore. Are they too smart? Are they too funny? Is it too blank for mainstream acceptance? But
There's a
this
quote
album,
from Ron that I go back to all the time, and I really should have it exact, but he said I'm paraphrasing, but this was years ago. He said, "We have one foot in the pop world and one foot in the art world, and as a result, we've alienated everybody." But
sure,
let's talk about
sure,
the songs just a little bit. We talked a little bit about "Dancing is Dangerous" and "Is There More to Life Than Dancing" and that amazing connectivity. But
yeah,
that's kind of stands as a suite all unto
yeah,
itself. And then you get to the second side, and a song that I didn't think much before has now really got stuck in my head, which is "The Night They Invented Love." The night that they invented love, I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah, it's funny because I've had at various stages of my love affair with this album, different songs sprout up as the one that I'm crowning as the song on the album. And oddly enough, for me right now, I think it might be Au revoir, but that suite, those two songs together, is different from the first album. Right away, you get the sexy saxophone over the top of the whole thing. Which kind of before it was completely fashionable. I think it kind of got taken to extremes in the '80s, but I I I love it. Now going back to the title track on the first side, I just want to say I love the fact that in the lyrics, the creepy doctor character makes an appearance. The same guy from Achu, who may have stolen someone's girlfriend, she hears voices. She's can't believe what's happening. She goes to see the doctor, and what's the doctor's response? Well, come see me tonight, baby. I'll cure you. And she just rejects
Says,
that. That'll
yeah,
just make it
that
worse.
might make it worse.
And she
Yeah,
knows where he's going with that right away and just kind of dismisses that. So yeah, so I'm sorry for backtracking on that, but I
no,
would
it's
have been
great.
really
It's great. It's
regretting
great.
if I didn't mention that perfect Ronism right there. So yeah, you get to side two, and you know what are the sounds kind of coming at you in this thing right away, and a thing that applies to those songs and to the whole album that I really just realized the last couple of weeks is that you can choose to listen to a different sound each time through these songs and get something completely different. And I know that's true of a lot of music. You can focus on the bass or the drums or guitar, but this album seems to particularly reward that kind of listening. And I didn't even know that until the last couple of weeks. So if you follow a certain sound through, like the night they invented love, you've got these like conga, bongo ish drum sounds.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that. And then their pitches are changing and going up and down. You get this, saxophone going through it, the hi hat cymbal over and over and over, and you're getting this building thing. And all I can picture the imagery I get in listening to a lot of these songs, and the night they invented love in particular, is this, somebody just who won't get off the dance floor. They're sweating. They don't need food. They don't need drink. They don't need anything. They've just got, maybe some cocaine and a whole bunch of will to stand out there and dance. And it's so of that era. Um, but I got to say, the story in The Night They Invented Love is very Adam and Eve to me. I don't know if that's your take on it, but this is so Ron, right? Like, what are you supposed to do when you make a disco album? Well, there's supposed to be sexy love songs. Okay, dancing sexy love songs. Okay, great. Well, what does Ron do with it? Ron's going to go back to like, well, how did this start? And like, not like, oh, where did disco come from? No, like the start of humankind. How did we start loving each other? And he starts off with this, they kind of figure it out. The characters, they invent love. Somebody felt a feeling they'd never felt before. And then I start to suspect that in Ron's head, this started to turn into a story about the night they invented sex more than just the night they invented love. And the two characters in it, she's talking to her paramour here. Um, it sounds to me like they go ahead and do the deed, and then afterwards decide they want to sell everybody else on the idea. And there's a line in there that's I kind of dispute what the line is, but he says, we can say it was from up above. We can be enterprising or in the prizing is the way it's listed on some places. There's not lyrics for this thing, so you don't even know exactly what they're saying. But it sounds to me like the two have done the deed. They decide they want to share this idea with the world, this love, sex, whatever idea they've just discovered. And the way they're going to do that is by kind of acting like they're just inventing it for the first time. They can say it's from up above. It's, oh, well, God gave us this gift, so it's okay. And we can be enterprising about this and spread it to all of humanity, which is also, to me, a very Ron thing. He's always obsessed with the marketing aspect of things that might not need marketing.
The first two songs stand on their own, perfect suite. The second side, in my humble perspective, is kind of telling the story of this woman in a little bit more depth. That she goes to the discos and she thinks she's found love. The next thing you know, it's au revoir. What did why did she left? He left, and then at the end, she's right back where she started. I want a man.
Lonely. Yes. the first side, she's in it, she's dancing, she's been hooked on this dancing thing, right? And then she's invents love, falls in love on the dance floor or in the Garden of Eden or wherever it is. And then the next thing you know, it's over. It is like Good Morning Get Away. Like, hey, this is great. We're in love and okay, goodbye. And
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
well,
great.
it was in the context of Au revoir that you used those terms about Ron and his lyrics. You used sly and diabolical, which
Yes.
totally in a
Yes.
positive way, but I loved it. I loved
Well,
it.
well, the au revoir. Let's talk about au revoir, right? The au revoir is a breakup song. All right, he's broken up with her. He happens to choose the words au revoir to do it, and I'm terrible at French, so I'm probably butchering that. But rather than the character just being devastated by the breakup, they're getting distracted by the actual phrase itself. Au revoir. Oh well, he just totally left me. My life's over. But that really sounded light and kind of breezy and doesn't hurt
Yeah.
so badly. Like what the who thinks like this? And it's Ron. Like there's no one else I think who could write a song like this other than Ron and have it actually work and be kind of clear that this is someone's kind of inner monologue, which is constantly distracted. Even though this really objectively bad thing happened. And this is the other thing, aside from just like the objectively good thing happens and he's immediately thinking how it can go sideways, the objectively bad thing happens. And rather than dwelling on it, he's already distracted by, oh, well, the words he used were kind of, that wasn't that bad, Oh, wow, I kind of like that.
What a way
It's
to say it. Yeah.
what a way to
I,
say
I
it.
think it's a great insight, and it's all Ron. It's all
It's all Ron, and
all.
that I'll admit the first few times I listened to this album, the Ron-ness of the lyrics wasn't immediately apparent to me. It sounds, if you give it a casual listen, you might think, oh, okay, they just threw some words on there for the disco songs, for the dance music, but no, no,
And,
no, no.
and all this stuff was too weird for Giorgio. He was
Right,
by this time he was like saying that guy and his lyrics, they're a little out there for me.
right to the
Which
point where
which
he said,
strikes me as so weird because they just had these massive hits.
right, and
So
and
why
I
wouldn't he say
wonder.
let's keep going?
And by the way, the best cut scene in the whole documentary is the Giorgio skiing down the mountain when he's supposed to be helping them with terminal jive. But he so was weirded out by them that he sicked Faltermeyer to, I think, popify them or, in our opinion, blandify them a little bit more for that follow-up album. So here we get them completely untethered to Giorgio. Like this is pure
Yes, that's
pure
that's
weirdness.
what we were
And that's
saying before.
yeah, and
Yes,
that's what's awesome about it. So, and then, Au revoir, like I said, lately has been my favorite song. They've all taken turns being my favorite song, except maybe Dancing is Dangerous. I really love it, but the ones that I've always loved, the title track, and let's get to I Want a Man, right? This to me is a foreshadowing of my baby's taking me home 23 years before that was a thing. And I think the genius of Lil Beethoven and that song in particular, a lot of it is taking these things they learned constructing dance music and changing the instrumentation in a way that's almost unrecognizable. But the song construction is still kind of the same. We're going to add a sound, we're going to add a layer, we're going to build it just a little bit. I want a man, don't want a boy. I just told you the whole lyrics to the song, right? Like that's it. And that's
well,
just being
she's
repeated.
just had this big breakup and she's sick of this nonsense.
She's sick of it, and now she want a man, and she doesn't want a boy. Maybe the last guy was a boy. I mean, he used au revoir to break up with her, whatever. But there's no other story there, and that's kind of like my baby's taking me home. It's just the same lyric repeated over and over and over, and the music is taking you somewhere else. And the bass on that song is just I can't wait when this thing gets released if these like DJ remix type people get a hold of some of these sounds from this album and the bass line on I Want a Man in particular. If you can ignore all the other weird cool synthy sounds they have repeating and coming in over the top of it, the like almost shrieking vocals, which there's parts of this where she's saying I want a man where there's got to be, like I said, 50 overdubs of her singing, and then they'll bring it down to just one vocal track and hear it just individually. But all of that is layered on top of this, to me, just sick bass thing that goes throughout the whole thing. And I'm not going to sit here and hum it over and over, but yeah, do it. Like listen to it and just try to focus on the bass on that song because it's wild. And I think I think people could make a rap song out of it. They could make a modern electronic song out of it. You could do a lot of things with this if you're of that ilk who knows how to take pieces of music and sample them and reshuffle them and stuff like that.
So, if you look at the big picture, you have an album that was kind of Ron and Russell Mael further exploring where they can go with this kind of electronic music, putting it into a real straightforward, not straightforward, but a more focused dance concept. And then it all fell apart.
Right. And I think, yeah, and it's I think part of the first knock on that was when this went nowhere. This gets released and does nothing anywhere. Not even like, oh, it was big in Malaysia or something, like some of their other albums were like it didn't do anything anywhere. And then they do the Terminal Jive experience and have, by all accounts, a miserable experience in the studio. Ron isn't allowed to play on parts of it.
Most
like I
of the
said,
songs were rejected.
yeah, right. Like just and the one that he keeps ends up being the biggest hit they ever have, like the big gigantic smash hit in France, "When I'm With You." But they and then they got so burned out by those 3 years of trying their hand at it that they didn't come back to it until a while later. But I do have to say that I am really convinced they are very, very proud of this album.
I
I
think
think they
it's
love
something
it.
that they feel strongly about, and the Record Store Day gave them a great opportunity to get it out there.
I think they're really proud of this one, and I understand why, especially after listening to it closely the last few weeks. Like the amount of work and construction that went into making these things, these layered soundscapes, if I'm going to borrow a cheesy term, but that's that's what I hear when I hear this, and I didn't hear any of that when I first listened to it. It's just hey, some disco thing, but
Exactly, exactly.
it's
That was my
yeah,
experience as well.
yeah,
And
and I think it's
yeah,
going to reward people if they when they this thing gets released and you listen to it closely and earbuds or something like that. I think it's going to really be a rewarding thing for people.
well, I agree with you, and I thank you so much, Mr. Tacular. I guess we'll call you.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Well, hey,
but
my name is
seriously,
Drew. I've
this was
told you that. I'm Drew. Everybody. I'm
he's Drew.
revealing my
He's Drew.
ugly face here to the Twitter sphere. So now what this one grumpy tweeter looks like, and I gotta say to everybody out there, if anybody does see this from Twitter, like it's been really fun. You guys are a really really good time. The stuff that goes on Sparks Twitter is, I think, some of the coolest shit that I've come across online, and I did make sure I get to swear once here in this whole thing. So there you go, Monty.
So Drew, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you.
I want everybody to go out and listen to this album and enjoy it. And happy Record Store Day, everybody! Join me again soon for a new episode, and we are going to talk to. Well, I don't know who we're going to talk to yet, but we're going to talk to somebody interesting, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And it's all about the content, folks. If you want to get content like this, subscribe, share, let people know about this show, because I I believe we're doing something special. What do you think, Drew?
100%. It's fantastic, and I appreciate all the effort you've poured into it. And if there's anyone out there who hasn't read your Sparks Drummers project, they should go find that too.
Well, thank you, Drew. The check's in the mail. Appreciate that. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon with a brand new episode. See you later, folks.
Au revoir.